Woo! Numero uno, here I come!
Samurai Jack, a show that has a host of very well decorated and diverse villains and characters in general. In this video, we'll go over one of the more unique and possibly an enemy who was created by evil scientists under the thumb of Aku. Well then, let's get to it. Picture this, if you will, a whimsical fighter, and add on to that he's also a musician, but he's also a Terminator. This is how you get Scaramouche. The personality of this robotic humanoid is a psychotic and devious one who does wicked and evil work. As he's shown to have slaughtered entire villages, I would argue he might actually be one of Aku's most ruthless and merciless soldiers, and one of the evilest ones. He serves Aku with undying respect and unwavering loyalty, but that is a very, very bad thing for those on the other end of his blade. Unlike the other robots who come after Jack, Scaramouche has a lot of personality, and he has so much personality, he doesn't even want to fight Jack without his magical sword. This is because he's a bit arrogant, and he's unironically a bit of comic relief in the clown, which I'll talk about that reference later. We're not introduced to Scaramouche's backstory very much through Samurai Jack the show, but it does seem to resemble the X model that Aku created, or that his scientists rather created. He could be an upgrade of those models or a one-man show entirely, as originally when Jack fought the X model, they were all fighting him at one time in kind of this mob kind of style. This one model, Scaramouche, can seem to be a one-man army. The X model, they were created by Aku's evil scientists, which is why I hypothesize Scaramouche was also created by his evil scientists, and he implemented this X model before using his signature black beetles. They, like Scaramouche, tend to resemble a human skeleton and function in what is like a robotic humanoid, or Terminator kind of function. They were extremely formidable to Jack, and Scaramouche is no different. In fact, he's even deadlier. We find Scaramouche in the last season of Samurai Jack, and that he has direct communication to Aku via smartphone. He speaks to Jack almost as if they've had many battles. I think that he was probably programmed with a lot of information and intel on Jack's abilities. He seems to be a formidable warrior, as he's disappointed, as mentioned before, when Jack no longer has a sword, and he hardly wants to fight Jack. He's a good enough swordsman to give Jack immense trouble when trying to dodge his blade and do direct combat with him, so much so that Jack, for the first time, really struggles fighting Scaramouche, and he uses his advanced swordsmanship in combination with his tuning fork to not only have projectiles, but also spice up his combat a bit. As mentioned earlier, Scaramouche reminds me of a Terminator. He seems to have taken inspiration from that, and he's taken direct inspiration from other things that I'll go over later in the video. Scaramouche has some of the most unique powers we see in Samurai Jack, and we'll go over a few of them now. One of his powers includes his musical telekinesis, which he could activate by using his magical flute. He can use levitation with this musical ability as well in order to fight, and when the flute is destroyed, Samurai Jack found out his real power was his voice, and he also scats like what you'd find in jazz music. Even though it was thought that the flute was the source of his power, it was instead a device he used to channel his true musical ability, which allows him his telekinesis. This telekinesis was very effective against Jack, and was only stopped when Jack damaged his neck and he could no longer use his singing voice. On top of having telekinesis, he's an expert swordsman. He can fight Jack with a blade, and he can fight Jack with not only one blade, but multiple blades, as he's shown using a scimitar and his signature tuning knife, which functions something strange for him, as it helps him tune his tonality with his voice, and he can also turn that into a weapon and unleash high-frequency projectiles. His design reminds me of a samurai who's a master at all tools. He also excels in his movement, and he can jump around almost anywhere, and he can very quickly dodge. Another thing I will mention, which is strange despite him being a robotic man, is that he is waterproof. And not only is he waterproof, he can even float on water, despite his body being made of metal, and him being a robot. As we see, Scaramouche has a host of tools that I believe would make him a rushdown fighter if he was in a fighting game. If Samurai Jack had a fighting game and Scaramouche was a selectable character, I think he'd be an awesome character that would rush his enemies down while having some tools to deal with projectiles and his tuning and frequency projectiles. Interestingly enough, Scaramouche has a whole host of references and inspiration. He was based off of an Italian clown of the same name, so we have a very healthy source for his reference. He often would also scat, which is very jazz and very inspired by American music. The Italian clown who he got his name from also appeared to be a henchman at times and a deceiver. He was also shown to be involved with music, and there was a French artist who had the same name, Scaramouche as well, go figure. And also, the Italian clown would often receive a punch to the head, which would make his head fall off. Sound familiar? At this point, it's very clear where his inspiration comes from, considering that same inspiration, Scaramouche, was also associated with puppetry. Another clear reference, going back to the jazz theme, is jazz music. Scaramouche does a lot of scatting and he does a lot of singing, but his main channeling when he's using his voice seems to be 1920s, up to 1950s jazz scatting, which I find interesting and pretty cool. I would have loved to have seen a battle between Scaramouche and someone like Demongo, whom I've done another video on, and I'll leave that link below. This character had great potential, and I feel like he lived up to what he was. He was a clown, and he was also a great swordsman, sometimes being comic relief, and other times being a serious fighter. Seeing him versus Demongo would have been a great fight, although they both worked for a coup, so that definitely probably would not have happened. It still would be cool to see. Samurai Jack, make a fighting game, please. A warrior with musical kinesis versus a wizard who can cast out the souls of warriors. But hey, that's just a wish list idea. If you liked the video, subscribe, and thanks for making it this far. Peace.